Remembering the 1970s. Remember life before the internet, when things were simpler and groovier. Join us as we explore the 1970s, a decade of iconic trends, unforgettable moments, and childhood experiences. From questionable fashion to imaginative toys and captivating TV shows, get ready to relive the magic of the 70s on this far-out journey. Saturday morning cartoons. And let's not forget the highlight of our week, Saturday morning cartoons. This was our sacred time, a chance to escape into a world of superheroes, wacky adventures, and hilarious antics. If you missed your favorite show, you were out of luck until the following Saturday. There was no on-demand streaming, no DVRs, just the anticipation of waiting for that specific time slot. It taught us patience, and it made those Saturday mornings even more special. The bowl cut. And then there was the bowl cut. This hairstyle, with its straight-across bangs and neatly trimmed edges, was practically a uniform for kids in the 70s. It was a no-fuss, low-maintenance style that was easy for parents to manage. A bowl and a pair of scissors were all you needed. Even girls sported bowl-cut bangs, adding a touch of androgynous charm to their look. The Brady Bunch. Man, who didn't love that show? It was the ultimate blended family, with 3 boys, 3 girls, a live-in maid, and a dog named Tiger. Sure, it was a bit too perfect, a bit too sunshine and rainbows to be real life. But that's exactly why it resonated with so many of us back then. In a decade of change and uncertainty, the Brady Bunch offered a comforting vision of family harmony. It was an escape, a fantasy that we could all relate to on some level, even if our own families were a bit more, shall we say, dynamic. CB radios. Then there were CB radios. Originally the domain of truckers, these little boxes became a huge craze in the 70s. Suddenly, everyone wanted to chat with strangers over the airwaves, using handles like Sparky or Mama Bear. Remember 10-4, Good Buddy? Or Breaker, Breaker, Come in Earth? CB radios gave people a sense of community, a way to connect with others in a world that felt increasingly isolating. It also added a little bit of excitement and adventure to everyday life, especially for kids who got to listen in on the grown-up chatter, though sometimes we had to cover our ears. Macramé. And who could forget the macramé explosion? Seriously, it was everywhere. From plant hangers that turned our homes into mini jungles to wall hangings and even those iconic macramé owls, this crafty trend took over in a big way. Macramé was a perfect fit for the 70s vibe, earthy, DIY, and a little bit bohemian. Plus, it was a relatively inexpensive way to personalize your space and add a touch of handmade charm. Colors. The 70s were a bold and unapologetic explosion of hues. Think avocado green, harvest gold, burnt orange, and sunshine yellow. These weren't just accent colors, folks. We're talking entire kitchens decked out in avocado appliances, shag carpets that could rival a meadow, and cars with interiors that resembled a psychedelic sunset. It was a time when color wasn't just an afterthought, it was a statement. It reflected the era's optimistic and experimental spirit. Ottomans. Now picture this. You're lounging in your avocado green living room, and what do you see? An ottoman, of course. These round, cushioned seats were everywhere in the 70s. Officially, they were meant to be footstools, but for kids, they were so much more. They were spaceships, islands in a sea of shag carpet, and the perfect platform for practicing our superhero landings. Who hasn't pretended to be Superman soaring through the air, only to land with a gentle thud on a trusty ottoman? Evel Knievel. Speaking of daring feats, the 70s were also the era of Evel Knievel. This legendary daredevil captivated audiences with his death-defying motorcycle stunts. He jumped over canyons, buses, even fountains. Evel Knievel was more than just a stuntman. He was an icon, a symbol of pushing boundaries and embracing risk, and his influence didn't stop at the TV screen. Neighborhoods across the country were filled with kids building makeshift ramps and attempting their own, much smaller scale, jumps. We used Tonka trucks, skateboards, anything we could find to emulate our hero. Of course, safety wasn't always a top priority. Sorry, Mom. Lunchboxes. These weren't your flimsy plastic bags or insulated totes of today. We're talking metal fortresses designed to protect your peanut butter and jelly from anything short of a nuclear blast. But the real magic of these lunchboxes was the artwork. They were canvases showcasing our favorite superheroes, TV characters, and pop culture icons. Superman, Batman, Evel Knievel, the $6 Million Man, you name it. It was probably on a lunchbox. These lunchboxes weren't just containers for food. They were status symbols, a way to express your personality and allegiance to your favorite heroes. The Bicentennial. And speaking of heroes, 1976 brought a wave of patriotism as the United States celebrated its 200th birthday, the Bicentennial. Red, white, and blue were suddenly the hottest fashion trend, and flags were everywhere. Parades marched down Main Street, fireworks lit up the night sky, and historical reenactments brought the past to life. The Bicentennial was more than just a celebration. It was a moment of national pride and unity, a chance to reflect on the country's history and look to the future with optimism. What are your favorite 70s memories? Share them in the comments below. Pet rocks. Let's talk about the pet rock. Yep, you heard that right. A rock, marketed as a pet. It sounds crazy now, but in the mid-70s, these little guys were all the rage. They came in their own little cardboard carrying cases, complete with a care and training manual. The genius, or maybe the absurdity, of the pet rock was its simplicity. It was low maintenance, didn't require feeding or walking, and was guaranteed to never run away. It was a tongue-in-cheek commentary on the pet craze, and for a brief moment, everyone wanted in on the joke. Tupperware. It seemed like every mom in the 70s was either selling it or attending Tupperware parties. These airtight containers, in their signature avocado green, harvest gold, and burnt orange hues, were a kitchen staple. They were practically indestructible. You could drop them, stack them, and even accidentally leave them in the sun, and they'd still be good as new. Tupperware parties were a social event, a chance for women to get together, chat, and maybe even score some new kitchen gadgets. Tang. And who could forget Tang? This orange-flavored powdered drink hit the market in the late 50s, but really took off in the 70s, thanks in part to its association with the space program. Tang was marketed as the drink of astronauts, suggesting that it was packed with vitamins and nutrients that could fuel our journeys to the stars. The reality, as Buzz Aldrin himself admitted, was a bit less glamorous. Tang wasn't exactly a culinary masterpiece. But for a while, we all wanted to sip on the orange-flavored concoction, hoping it might give us a little bit of that astronaut brilliance. Wood paneling. In the 70s, cars weren't just a mode of transportation, they were a statement. And nothing said 70s style quite like the wood-paneled station wagon. Now, this wasn't real wood, mind you. It was actually vinyl siding, cleverly designed to mimic the look of wood grain. But hey, who needed the real deal when you could have the look without the worry of termites or wood rot? These woodies were the ultimate family vehicle, perfect for hauling kids, groceries, and maybe even a surfboard or two. Sea monkeys. But the 70s weren't just about stylish cars. It was also the golden age of comic books and magazines. And tucked away in the back pages of those publications were the ads that fueled our childhood dreams. X-ray specs, decoder rings, and yes, even live baby chicks. You could find it all in those mail-order ads. One of the most popular items was the sea monkeys. The ads promised a magical underwater world populated by adorable, humanoid creatures. But when those tiny packets arrived in the mail, the reality was often a bit different. Sea monkeys, it turned out, were actually brine shrimp, far less glamorous than their advertised counterparts. It was a lesson in the power of advertising and the sometimes disappointing gap between expectation and reality. Liquid paper. Before computers and the magical backspace key, there was liquid paper, also known as whiteout. This little bottle of correction fluid was our saving grace when it came to fixing mistakes on handwritten papers and letters. But it wasn't exactly instant gratification. You'd carefully paint over the error, then wait and wait for it to dry. Impatient students, which was pretty much all of us, would resort to blowing on the wet spot, hoping to speed up the process. It might have worked, but it also made us look a bit ridiculous. And let's be honest, by the time the liquid paper finally dried, we'd often lost our train of thought. Aluminum cans. In the 70s, these weren't the sleek pop-top wonders we have today. They were more like sturdy cylinders with a unique opening mechanism, the pull tab. You'd grab that little ring, give it a yank, and a wedge-shaped opening would appear, granting you access to your refreshing beverage. But those pull tabs had a dark side. They were notorious for being discarded carelessly, littering parks, beaches, and even swimming areas. And stepping on one of those sharp metal tabs could result in a nasty cut. Eventually, public safety concerns led to a redesign, and the modern stay-attached tab was born, making the world a safer and cleaner place. Don't forget to share your own 70s memories in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe for more nostalgic trips down memory lane. Patty Hearst. In 1974, this heiress to the newspaper fortune was kidnapped by a radical group known as the Symbionese Liberation Army, SLA. What followed was a bizarre and shocking turn of events. Patty, who took on the name Tanya, seemingly embraced her captor's ideology and even participated in bank robberies with them. The nation was captivated by the story, questioning whether she was a victim, a brainwashed accomplice, or something in between. Patty's trial and eventual conviction sparked debates about free will, coercion, and the power of radical groups. No bike helmets. In the 70s, these were practically unheard of. Wearing a helmet wasn't just uncool, it was often seen as a sign of weakness or a past injury. We hopped on our bikes, wind in our hair, and embraced the freedom of the open road, bumps and bruises included. Looking back, it might seem reckless, but it was also a testament to our youthful invincibility, or perhaps our ignorance. Nixon. But even carefree childhoods couldn't escape the shadow of the Watergate scandal. Even if we didn't fully grasp the political complexities, we knew something big was happening in Washington. The evening news was filled with talk of impeachment, cover-ups, and a disgraced president. And the image of Richard Nixon boarding that helicopter after resigning from office remains etched in our collective memory. It was a pivotal moment in American history, a reminder that even the most powerful figures could be held accountable. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Polaroid cameras. Before smartphones and digital photography, these were the ultimate in instant gratification. You'd snap a photo, and within minutes, a physical print would emerge, slowly developing before your eyes. It was magical. And who could resist the urge to shake those developing photos, believing it would somehow speed up the process? It probably didn't do much, but it was part of the Polaroid ritual. American Pie. The 70s were a time of experimentation and storytelling in music, and sometimes the lyrics were more like puzzles than straightforward narratives. Take Don McLean's iconic American Pie, for example. Who was the jester? What was the king's thorny crown? And who the heck was Jack? We debated these questions endlessly, coming up with our own interpretations. It was part of the fun. The mystery added to the song's allure. Smoking. In the 70s, smoking was everywhere. People lit up in restaurants, offices, airplanes, you name it. The concept of secondhand smoke wasn't widely discussed, and the dangers of smoking weren't as well known as they are today. From candy cigarettes to the iconic Marlboro Man, smoking was even glamorized to some extent. It was a different time, for sure. What are your memories of these 70s experiences? Share your stories in the comments below. TV reception. Remember those rabbit ears? The joys of adjusting those antennas, trying to coax a clear picture out of the fuzzy static known as snow. It was a delicate art, a combination of patience, persistence, and maybe a little bit of luck. We'd twist and turn those antennas, sometimes adding foil or even constructing elaborate contraptions to improve reception. And woe betide the child who accidentally messed up the picture during Dad's favorite show. That was a recipe for a stern lecture. Limited channels. Speaking of shows, the channel selection back then was a far cry from the hundreds of options we have today. If you were lucky, you might have had access to 3 or 4 major networks, plus a few local stations. That meant everyone in the family had to agree on what to watch, and channel surfing wasn't exactly a thrilling pastime. And if you wanted to change the channel, well, you had to get up and do it yourself, or convince a younger sibling to be your human remote control. Sign-off. And then there was the sign-off. Television didn't run 24/7 back then. At a certain point in the evening, usually around midnight or 1 a.m., the stations would go off the air. Sometimes they'd play a patriotic montage, a test pattern, or even just leave the screen filled with static. It was a signal that it was time for bed, a reminder that the world outside the television screen still existed. What are your memories of watching TV in the 70s? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more nostalgic journeys back in time. Passing notes. Remember the thrill of scribbling a message on a folded piece of paper, carefully passing it to your friend under the watchful eye of the teacher. It was a risky game, a test of stealth and ingenuity. And if you got caught? Well, that could be mortifying. The teacher might confiscate the note and read it aloud to the entire class, exposing your secrets or your terrible handwriting for all to see. Snail mail. But even if you weren't passing notes, communication in the 70s was a far cry from the instantaneity of today's digital world. We wrote letters, real letters, with pen and paper. We learned cursive, practiced our typing skills on clunky typewriters, and carefully addressed envelopes. Then, we'd head to the post office, buy a stamp, and drop our letter in the mailbox, trusting that it would eventually reach its destination. And then came the waiting game. It could take days, even weeks, for a letter to arrive. But that anticipation, that sense of excitement when you finally received a handwritten letter, was something special. What are your memories of passing notes and sending snail mail? Share your stories in the comments below. Photo booths. While smartphones were still decades away, we had our own way of capturing silly moments with friends. The photo booth. These iconic booths were a fixture in arcades, malls, and even some amusement parks. You'd gather your friends, squeeze into the cramped space, sometimes with hilarious results, and pose for a series of quick flashes. The black and white photos would emerge in a strip, often with distorted faces, awkward angles, and maybe even a photobomb surprise. What are your memories of 70s photo booths? Urban legends. Remember Mikey from the Life cereal commercials? The picky eater who supposedly died after mixing Pop Rocks and Coca-Cola? It was a classic urban legend, a cautionary tale passed down on playgrounds and whispered at sleepovers. Without the internet to fact-check these stories, we relied on word of mouth, and our imaginations ran wild. Of course, Mikey didn't actually explode, but the legend persisted, adding a touch of spooky excitement to our lives. School supplies. Hey there, former classmates. Today we're taking a nostalgic trip back to the 1970s classroom, exploring the essential school supplies, the quirky toys that entertained us, and the unique technology that produced our worksheets. Remember the trusty wooden pencil? It was the workhorse of our school days, a simple yet indispensable tool for writing, drawing, and even doodling during boring lectures. And let's not forget the pencil case, a treasure trove of erasers, sharpeners, and maybe even a slide ruler, a symbol of academic ambition, even if we weren't quite sure how to use it. Silly Putty. Then there was Silly Putty, the stretchy, bouncy substance that provided endless entertainment. We'd press it onto newspaper comics, creating distorted copies of our favorite characters. It was a low-tech way of sharing memes, before memes were even a thing. Ditto Machines. And who could forget the distinct aroma of Ditto, or mimeograph machines? These marvels of 70s technology produced our worksheets and homework assignments, leaving a faint purple ink residue on our fingers. The smell was unmistakable, a unique blend of chemicals and nostalgia. Schoolhouse Rock. Saturday mornings were sacred. We'd wake up early, pour ourselves a bowl of sugary cereal, and settle in for hours of animated adventures. But amidst the superheroes, talking animals, and wacky antics, there was a different kind of show that captured our attention. Schoolhouse Rock. With its catchy tunes and clever animation, Schoolhouse Rock taught us about grammar, history, science, and even math. We learned about conjunctions through the Conjunction Junction song, memorized multiplication tables with My Hero Zero, and explored the workings of the U.S. government with I'm Just a Bill. Jaws. Steven Spielberg's 1975 masterpiece terrified audiences worldwide, turning a simple trip to the beach into a potential encounter with a man-eating shark. Suddenly, even lakes and ponds seemed menacing, and the iconic Jaws theme music could send shivers down your spine. But fear wasn't the only legacy of Jaws. It also sparked a wave of shark-themed play, with kids pretending to be the fearsome predator, chasing their friends through the water with playful, hopefully, chomping motions. The metric system. In the mid-70s, the U.S. government made a serious push to convert the country to metric units. Schools showed us films about metric marvels, and we learned about meters, liters, and grams. It felt like a massive shift, a potential upheaval of everything we knew about measurement. For kids, it was both confusing and a bit scary. Would we ever be able to think in meters instead of feet? Thankfully, the full-scale metric takeover never quite materialized, but the memory of that attempted conversion remains a quirky footnote in 70s history. Playgrounds. And let's not forget the playgrounds of our youth. These weren't the padded, safety-conscious structures of today. 70s playgrounds were made of metal, with unforgiving surfaces and equipment that seemed designed to test our limits, and sometimes our bones. We'd swing as high as we could, attempting to go all the way around, or spin the merry-go-round until our friends were flung off like rag dolls. It was a time of scraped knees, bruised egos, and a healthy dose of adrenaline. Sunscreen? In the 70s, sunscreen wasn't the ubiquitous summer essential it is today. We worshipped the sun, basking in its rays for hours, hoping to achieve that perfect golden tan, or sometimes ending up with a painful sunburn. No one lectured us about SPF or the dangers of UV rays. We slathered on baby oil or tanning lotion, eager to accelerate the bronzing process. It was a different time, for sure. Charlie's Angels. But the 70s weren't just about sun-kissed skin. They also brought us the iconic crime-fighting trio known as Charlie's Angels. These glamorous detectives, with their feathered hair, stylish outfits, and impressive martial arts skills, captivated audiences worldwide. Girls wanted to be them, boys had crushes on them, and everyone tuned in to see their latest adventures. Whether you were Team Jaclyn Smith, Team Kate Jackson, or Team Farrah Fawcett, whose iconic poster adorned countless bedroom walls, Charlie's Angels were a symbol of female empowerment and 70s cool. Short shorts. And speaking of cool, let's talk about short shorts. These were the ultimate in casual comfort, a unisex fashion statement that embraced a little bit of leg-revealing boldness. Boys and girls alike sported short shorts, often paired with tube socks, creating a look that was both practical and stylish, or at least we thought so at the time. It was a trend that captured the carefree spirit of the 70s, a time when fashion was about expressing yourself and embracing a little bit of individuality. What are your memories of these 70s trends? Share your stories in the comments below. Hitchhiking. In the 70s, it wasn't the taboo activity it's often considered today. If you needed a ride, you'd stick out your thumb, and chances were someone would stop and offer you a lift. It was a time of greater trust and a sense of community on the open road. People were more likely to help a stranger in need, whether it was offering a ride or assisting with a flat tire. It was a different era, a time when the kindness of strangers wasn't as rare as it might seem today. Then there was television. In the 70s, TV wasn't the on-demand, multi-channel extravaganza we have now. We had a limited selection of channels, and we watched what was on when it was on. This meant that certain shows and commercials became ingrained in our memories. We can still sing the Sesame Street theme song, recite the Oscar Mayer jingle, and remember the catchy tunes from Schoolhouse Rock. These shows and commercials weren't just entertainment. They were part of our shared cultural experience. Star Wars. And speaking of shared experiences, let's not forget the arrival of Star Wars in 1977. This groundbreaking film introduced us to a galaxy far, far away, filled with lightsabers, the Force, and unforgettable characters like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. It was a cinematic revolution, a story that captured the imaginations of an entire generation. Star Wars wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural phenomenon that changed the landscape of science fiction and continues to inspire fans of all ages. A time of freedom. The 70s were a different era when it came to parenting and childhood freedom. We spent our days exploring our neighborhoods, riding our bikes without helmets, and playing outside until the streetlights came on. Stranger danger wasn't a constant worry, and we often interacted with people we didn't know, making new friends and acquaintances along the way. Risk. It wasn't that our parents were oblivious to the potential dangers. It was more a reflection of a different societal mindset. We were encouraged to be independent, to explore our surroundings, and to learn from our experiences, even if that meant a few scraped knees or bruised egos along the way. Looking back, it might seem like a risky way to raise children, but it also fostered a sense of independence, resilience, and resourcefulness. We learned to navigate our world, to trust our instincts, and to build relationships with people from all walks of life. Well, folks, that wraps up our groovy trip back to the 1970s. We've explored everything from avocado-colored appliances to the magic of Saturday morning cartoons, the thrill of passing notes in class, and the legacy of Star Wars. Whether you lived through the 70s or just appreciate its unique charm, we hope this journey brought back some fond memories and sparked a little bit of nostalgia. 20 dangers kids totally ignored in the 1960s and 1970s. Ever wonder what it was like to be a kid in the wild days of the 60s and 70s? Buckle up as we explore a world of playing on train tracks, chasing DDT trucks, and building bike ramps. Get ready to be amazed and maybe horrified by the crazy, risky adventures kids had back then. Dangerous playgrounds. Towering metal structures glinting in the sun, a jungle gym that seemed to reach for the sky, and a merry-go-round that could spin you into another dimension. It was a thrilling, if slightly terrifying, landscape for a kid. Those metal slides could get scorching hot on a summer day, and a fall from the jungle gym meant landing on hard-packed dirt or even concrete. But that didn't stop us from climbing to the highest point, testing our limits, and pushing our boundaries. We'd spin the merry-go-round until we were dizzy and giggling, daring each other to hang on for dear life. We'd pump our legs on the swings, trying to soar higher and higher, feeling the exhilarating moment when the swing set lifted off the ground. Yes, the 1970s playground was a place where you could get burned, bruised, or scraped. It was a place where a dare from a friend could lead to a minor injury, but also a triumphant story to tell later. It might seem like a dangerous place by today's standards, with its soft surfaces and safety regulations. But those old-school playgrounds also taught us resilience, resourcefulness, and the importance of pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones. BB gun fights. If you grew up in the 70s, chances are you or someone you knew had a BB gun. It was practically a childhood rite of passage. We'd spend hours plinking away at old soda cans, pretending we were sharpshooters. Carrying your BB gun around the neighborhood was as normal as riding your bike, and BB gun fights with friends were a regular weekend activity. Getting hit by a BB? That was a badge of honor, proof that you were tough enough to take it. Those little metal pellets could leave a nasty welt, but we'd shrug it off and keep playing. Sure, there was the risk of a ricochet hitting someone in the face or, even worse, the eye. But back then, people had a much higher tolerance for danger. Parents weren't as overprotective as they are today, and we were given a lot more freedom to explore and take risks. Looking back, it's easy to see how dangerous those BB gun battles could be. But they were also a part of a childhood that felt a bit more free and adventurous, where we learned to assess risk and deal with the consequences. Eating wild plants. Imagine a time when kids spent their days exploring the outdoors, their pockets filled with treasures found in nature. Back in the 70s, snacking on wild berries or sipping nectar from honeysuckle vines was all part of the adventure. If it looked like food and tasted good, we'd try it. It was a time of carefree exploration, and we weren't as worried about the potential dangers lurking in the wild. Sure, there was a chance of eating something poisonous or having an allergic reaction, but that was just part of the risk. It added a certain thrill to our outdoor escapades. Most of us learned from our parents which plants were safe to eat and which ones to avoid. We'd proudly identify a patch of wild strawberries or a honeysuckle vine, sharing our knowledge with friends. It was a way of connecting with nature, of understanding the bounty that surrounded us. It fostered a sense of independence and resourcefulness, a feeling that we could survive and thrive in the wild, even if it was just our backyard. Looking back, it's clear that eating wild plants without proper knowledge can be dangerous. But those experiences also taught us valuable lessons about observation, experimentation, and respecting the natural world. Today's kids might be more cautious, with greater awareness of potential dangers, but they might also miss out on the simple joy of discovering and tasting the wild treats that nature has to offer. Riding bikes without helmets. Picture a sunny afternoon in the 60s. Kids on bikes, weaving through neighborhood streets, wind whipping through their hair, not a helmet in sight. It was a time of carefree fun, and nobody thought twice about hopping on a bike without head protection. Helmets were seen as something race car drivers or astronauts wore, not for everyday folks enjoying a leisurely ride. Back then, people had a different view of risk. They trusted their ability to handle a bicycle and didn't see the need for bulky safety gear. But things started to change in the late 70s and early 80s. We began to learn more about the dangers of head injuries, and studies showed just how important helmets were in preventing them. Slowly but surely, the message of bicycle safety began to spread. Campaigns popped up, encouraging parents and kids to wear helmets. The focus was on showing how easy it was to protect yourself from serious injury without sacrificing the joy of riding a bike. Today, wearing a helmet is the norm for most cyclists. We may have lost that wind in your hair feeling, but we've gained something far more valuable: peace of mind, knowing we're doing everything we can to stay safe on two wheels. No seatbelts. Imagine piling into the back of a station wagon with your siblings, facing the rear window and waving at the cars behind you. That was the epitome of freedom for kids in the 1970s. Seatbelts? They were optional at best, often ignored or even non-existent in the back of those spacious wagons. Families would embark on long road trips, with kids sprawled out in the back, playing games, reading comics, or napping without a care in the world. Sudden stops might send us flying forward, and sharp turns could result in a pile of giggling kids. But it was all part of the adventure, a testament to the carefree spirit of the time. Parents didn't worry too much about safety back then. It was a different era, with a different understanding of risk. Looking back, it's clear that riding without seatbelts was incredibly dangerous. We're fortunate that safety standards have evolved, and seatbelt use is now mandatory in most parts of the world. Those carefree rides in the back of the station wagon might seem like a distant memory, but they represent a time when childhood was a little less structured, a little more adventurous, and a lot more about enjoying the simple pleasures of life, even if it meant taking a few risks along the way. Children working certain jobs. It's the 1960s, and the rules about kids working were a whole lot different. Especially out in the countryside, kids were often expected to pitch in and work, doing jobs that would raise eyebrows today. Think about it. Young teens, even younger kids sometimes, working on farms, in family businesses, or even factories. It wasn't unusual to see kids doing tough farm work, sometimes in risky situations. Many helped out in their family's stores, restaurants, or whatever business they ran. Remember paper routes? Lots of young boys delivered newspapers back then. And babysitting? Young girls often took care of other people's kids, without all the rules and guidelines we have now. Some kids even worked in factories, doing light manufacturing or assembly line jobs. Now, fast forward to today, and things have changed big time. We have strict laws about what kind of jobs kids can do, how many hours they can work, and what the conditions should be like. There are rules for different age groups, with extra protection for kids under 16. It's all about making sure kids are safe, getting an education, and just being kids. This change shows how much we value childhood now, compared to back in the 60s. We've realized that kids need time to learn, play, and grow, not just work. Playing on train tracks. A lazy summer afternoon in the 70s, a group of kids heads towards the train tracks, a common hangout spot back then. They might be placing pennies on the rails to see them flattened by a passing train, or maybe they're testing their aim by throwing rocks at the train cars. Some might even be brave enough to walk along the tracks, using the rails as a balance beam. And then there were the trestles, those narrow bridges spanning deep ravines. Crossing a trestle was a true test of courage. You'd hear the rumble of a train in the distance, but the dare was to keep going, heart pounding in your chest. The fear of falling, or worse, getting hit by a train, was very real. But for some kids, the thrill of the challenge was too tempting to resist. Looking back, it's clear that playing on train tracks was incredibly dangerous. Thankfully, we've become much more aware of the risks involved, and kids today are less likely to put themselves in such perilous situations. Exploring abandoned buildings. That was the 70s, a time when kids spent most of their days outdoors, creating their own adventures. We'd climb through broken windows, navigate rusty nails and shattered glass, and balance on rickety boards without a second thought. The thrill of discovering a hidden space, transforming it into a secret fort or a battlefield for our imaginations, was worth the risk of a scraped knee or a tetanus shot. Back then, parents weren't as worried about where we were or what we were up to. We had a lot more freedom to roam and explore, even if it meant getting into a little bit of mischief. Those abandoned buildings held a sense of mystery and excitement. We'd invent stories about who might have lived there or what secrets the walls held. What's the craziest thing you remember doing as a kid in the 60s or 70s? Share your stories in the comments. Playing with fireworks. Remember the thrill of lighting a firecracker and watching it explode in a shower of sparks? For kids in the 70s, playing with fireworks was a quintessential part of summer, a source of excitement and, let's be honest, a little bit of danger. Whether it was cherry bombs, bottle rockets, or those little black cat firecrackers, we handled them with a sense of daring and a lot less supervision than kids today. We'd light them off in our backyards, aiming for the sky, or sometimes trying to blow up an old can or a dirt pile. Of course, things didn't always go according to plan. A black cat might explode prematurely, or a bottle rocket could take a sudden turn and head straight for the neighbor's fence. But those mishaps were just part of the fun, adding to the sense of adventure and unpredictability. For young boys especially, playing with fireworks was a way to test their courage, impress their friends, and experience the thrill of small-scale explosions. It was a time when parents were less likely to hover and more likely to let kids explore and learn through trial and error, even if it meant a few singed eyebrows or a minor burn. Looking back, it's clear that playing with fireworks could be dangerous. But it was also a part of a childhood that encouraged independence, creativity, and a healthy dose of risk-taking. Today's kids might have safer, more controlled firework displays, but they might also miss out on the sense of excitement and wonder that came with lighting a fuse and watching the sparks fly. Hooky bobbing. But the 70s weren't just about chasing DDT trucks. Winter brought its own set of daring activities, like hooky bobbing. This involved grabbing onto the back of a moving car and sliding on the icy streets, essentially turning yourself into a human sled. The thrill came from the speed, the unpredictability of the ice, and the challenge of holding on for dear life as the car sped away. It was a risky game, but for many kids, the adrenaline rush was worth it. Hooky bobbing was especially popular on snow days when school was canceled, and we had hours to fill with creative, if slightly dangerous, fun. It's a testament to the ingenuity and fearlessness of 70s kids, who found ways to entertain themselves with whatever resources they had available, even if it meant risking a few bumps and bruises along the way.
Rolling down hills in tractor tires.
A sunny afternoon in the 70s, a group of kids gathered at the top of a steep hill and a giant tractor tire lying nearby. This wasn't just any tire. It was a vehicle for adventure, a source of pure, unadulterated fun. We'd climb inside that tire, let our friends give us a push, and off we'd go, rolling down the hill with absolutely no control over where we were headed. The tire would pick up speed, bouncing and bumping along the way. Whether we crashed into a tree or ended up in a ditch didn't matter. It was all about the thrill of the ride and seeing who could stay rolling the longest. We'd emerge from the tire dizzy, bruised, and covered in grass stains, but with huge grins on our faces. It was the kind of exhilarating, slightly dangerous fun that defined childhood in the 70s. No helmets, no supervision, just pure adrenaline and the freedom to push our limits. Looking back, it's a wonder we survived without any serious injuries. Roughhousing in sports. Imagine a neighborhood street in the 70s transformed into a makeshift football field or a hockey rink. Kids of all ages gathered, ready for a game that was as much about testing their toughness as it was about scoring points. Forget about fancy pads and helmets. We played with reckless abandon, embracing the rough-and-tumble nature of the game. Scrapes, bruises, and even the occasional broken bone were seen as badges of honor, proof that you were giving it your all. Full contact was the norm, and we played to win, pushing ourselves and our opponents to the limit. Games could get intense, with arguments and scuffles breaking out, but we learned to settle our own disputes and shake off any hard feelings. We played until the streetlights came on, our bodies aching, our clothes covered in dirt and sweat, but our spirits soaring with the satisfaction of a hard-fought game. Those neighborhood games were more than just a way to pass the time. They were a microcosm of life in the 70s. We learned about teamwork, resilience, and the importance of pushing through adversity. We learned to stand up for ourselves and to respect our opponents, even when the competition was fierce. Today's kids might have more structured sports leagues and safety regulations, but they might also miss out on the raw, unfiltered joy of playing a game for the sheer love of it, without the pressure of trophies or parental expectations. Corporal punishment. Imagine a time when spanking was not just a common form of punishment, but a widely accepted parenting technique. That was the reality in the 1960s. The idea of spare the rod, spoil the child was taken very seriously, and many believed that physical discipline was the best way to teach kids right from wrong. In homes, a spanking was often the go-to response for misbehavior. Parents and even teachers believed it built character and instilled respect. Schools, too, often used corporal punishment. Paddles were a common sight in classrooms, not just as a threat, but as a tool to enforce discipline and authority. But society's views have changed dramatically since then. Today, many countries have banned corporal punishment in schools, and some have even outlawed it in homes. We've come to understand that physical punishment can be harmful to children, both physically and emotionally. Modern research suggests that positive reinforcement and other nonviolent methods are much more effective in teaching kids good behavior and helping them grow into well-adjusted adults. This shift in thinking reflects a broader change in how we view children and their rights. We've moved away from seeing them as needing to be controlled through fear and towards a more nurturing and supportive approach to parenting and education. Smoking everywhere. You're at a swanky restaurant in the 1960s, the air filled with the aroma of fine food and, well, cigarette smoke. Back then, smoking was everywhere. It wasn't just a habit, it was a cultural symbol, a sign of coolness you'd see in movies, on TV. Even doctors in ads were puffing away. Ashtrays were as common as salt and pepper shakers, and nobody batted an eye at lighting up indoors. But then came a turning point. In 1964, the Surgeon General dropped a bombshell report linking smoking to lung cancer and other serious health problems. This was a game changer. Slowly but surely, people started to realize just how dangerous smoking was. Fast forward to today, and smoking in public places is mostly a thing of the past. We've learned a lot about the dangers of secondhand smoke, and governments around the world have banned smoking in restaurants, offices, and even on airplanes. It's a big shift from the smoky haze of the 60s and 70s, and it's all about protecting our health and creating cleaner air for everyone to breathe. Now, when you walk into a restaurant, you're greeted by the delicious smell of food, not a cloud of smoke. No shirts, no shoes, no problem. Imagine a summer afternoon in the 70s. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and a group of kids is tearing down the street on their bikes, skateboards, and scooters, barefoot and shirtless, the epitome of carefree freedom. Back then, it wasn't unusual to see kids embracing the warm weather with minimal clothing. We'd spend hours playing outside, feeling the wind in our hair and the sun on our skin, unburdened by shoes or shirts. Of course, there were risks involved. Cuts, scrapes, stings, and rashes were all part of the package. But those minor inconveniences didn't dampen our spirits or keep us from enjoying the thrill of the ride. We'd come home with scraped knees and sunburns, but our moms were always ready with the Bactine, mercurochrome, and calamine lotion to patch us up. Poison ivy was a constant threat, but we learned to identify and avoid it, most of the time. Looking back, it's a wonder we didn't end up with more serious injuries. But those carefree days of running around barefoot and shirtless were a testament to the resilience and adventurous spirit of 70s kids. We weren't as concerned with safety and hygiene as kids are today. We were more focused on having fun, exploring our world, and pushing our boundaries. If you could go back in time and relive one of these crazy childhood experiences, which one would it be and why? Lack of environmental regulations. Imagine a time when factories could pump out smoke and chemicals without much concern for the environment. That was the reality of the 1960s, when the industrial boom was in full swing, and environmental regulations were practically non-existent. Back then, the idea of environmental protection was just starting to emerge, and people didn't fully grasp the impact of pollution on our planet. Recycling? It wasn't even on most people's radar. We lived in a use and throw society, where things were designed to be used once and then discarded. Fast forward to today, and the picture is vastly different. We have strict environmental laws in place to protect our air and water, and there's a growing awareness of the importance of sustainability. We're embracing green technology, finding ways to reduce our carbon footprint, and making recycling a regular part of our lives. It's a remarkable shift from the unchecked industrial practices of the 60s. We've come to understand that protecting our planet is essential for our own well-being and the well-being of future generations. Building makeshift bike ramps. Imagine a group of kids in the 70s, their bikes leaning against a pile of scrap wood, their eyes gleaming with excitement. They're building a makeshift ramp, a launch pad for their two-wheeled dreams. These weren't fancy, store-bought ramps. They were cobbled together from whatever wood they could find: old planks, discarded plywood, anything that could be propped up and ridden over. The ramps were often wobbly and unstable, adding an extra layer of challenge to the already daring feat of jumping over a row of friends lying on the ground below, acting as human obstacles. There were no helmets, no knee pads, just the thrill of soaring through the air, the cheers of your friends, and the inevitable crash landing. Scraped knees and bruised egos were badges of honor, proof that you were brave enough to push your limits and take risks. Those makeshift bike ramps were more than just a source of entertainment. They were a symbol of the 70s spirit, a time of improvisation, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. We learned to build, to adapt, and to bounce back from failures, all while having a blast. Today's kids might have access to safer, more sophisticated ramps, but they might also miss out on the raw, creative energy that came with building something from scratch and conquering a challenge with nothing but your wits and your friends by your side. Chasing DDT trucks. Imagine a group of kids in the 70s running through a thick cloud of fog, laughing and shouting as they chase after a truck. This wasn't just any fog, it was DDT, a pesticide being sprayed throughout neighborhoods. Back then, we didn't understand the dangers of inhaling those chemicals. It seemed like a harmless summer activity, no different from playing tag or riding bikes. Parents didn't express much concern either. It was just a normal part of life. Those DDT trucks would slowly roll down the street, leaving a dense white cloud in their wake, and we'd race through it, trying to stay enveloped in the fog for as long as possible. Looking back, it's shocking to think that we were exposed to such harmful chemicals without a second thought. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Drinking and driving. Think back to the 1960s, and you might picture a time when people weren't as aware of the dangers of drinking and driving as we are today. It wasn't uncommon to see someone hop behind the wheel after a few drinks, without much worry about the consequences. Back then, the attitude was more relaxed, almost indifferent to the risks involved. It was a time when seatbelts were rarely worn, speed limits were seen as suggestions, and the idea of a designated driver hadn't even been thought of. Drinking and driving just wasn't seen as the serious offense it is today. Fast forward to the present, and things have changed drastically. We now have strict laws against drunk driving, and public awareness campaigns have made it clear that getting behind the wheel after drinking is dangerous and unacceptable. We have learned a lot about the devastating impact of drunk driving accidents, and society as a whole has taken a much stronger stance against it. Owning exotic pets, especially big cats. That was the 60s, a time when the exotic pet trade was booming, and you might find monkeys, turtles, or even big cats living in suburban homes. People were fascinated by these creatures, seeing them as unique and exciting additions to their families. There wasn't much concern about the animals' welfare or the impact on their natural habitats. It's almost hard to believe now, but you might stumble upon a lion lounging in someone's backyard or a tiger in a family photo album. One famous example is the story of Neil the lion, who lived with actress Tippi Hedren and her family, including a young Melanie Griffith. Photos show Neil as part of their daily life, playing in the house and even sleeping in their beds. It's a stark contrast to today's world, where owning such animals is strictly regulated or completely banned in many places. What changed? Well, we've learned a lot about wildlife conservation and the risks of keeping exotic animals as pets. Laws like the Endangered Species Act and international agreements have made it much harder to buy and sell these creatures. Owning a monkey or a tiger is no longer seen as eccentric. It's a legal and ethical issue. We now understand that wild animals belong in the wild, not in our homes. Their well-being and the health of our ecosystems are far more important than the fleeting thrill of owning an exotic pet. If you're craving more blasts from the past, be sure to check out our other videos on 70s toys, fashion, and pop culture. And as always, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the flip side for another nostalgic adventure soon. Peace out.